All right, settle in, everyone. Dim the lights, maybe grab a coffee or something stronger. Because tonight we're not just talking about a road, we're talking about an artery, pulsing with the history, dreams, and yeah, the nightmares of America. We're talking about Route 66. Now, most of you know it as the Mother Road, a symbol of freedom, adventure, maybe a quirky diner or two. But have you ever truly considered what decades of hope, despair, joy, and tragedy, all funneled down one stretch of asphalt, might leave behind? What if I told you that some say a piece of that concentrated human experience still wanders the tarmac, thumb outstretched, waiting for a ride that never quite takes her where she needs to go? Tonight, we delve deep into one of its most enduring and chilling legends, the Ghostly Hitchhiker of Route 66. Is she just a campfire story spun from dust and diesel fumes? A figment born of lonely miles and too much caffeine? Or is there something more tangible, more terrifying, haunting those lonely stretches after the sun bleeds out of the desert sky? My name is Leo Maxwell, and for the better part of a decade, I've been what you might call a collector of whispers. I run a moderately successful podcast, Echoes from the Asphalt, where I explore the folklore and forgotten histories tied to America's highways. We'd covered the usual suspects: the vanishing prom queen, the phantom trucker with headlights that blaze through your soul, the spectral animals that dart across moonlit roads. The ghostly hitchhiker of Route 66, though, she was always the Everest of highway legends, elusive, pervasive. Everyone's heard a version: a woman in white, seen near a certain bridge or a desolate crossroads, usually in a flimsy dress, no matter the weather. She vanishes from the back seat, sometimes leaving behind a chill, sometimes a faint perfume. Sometimes she's silent, a mournful wraith. Other times she whispers a warning, a cryptic prophecy that only makes sense in hindsight. Classic, right? Almost too classic. A trope polished smooth by countless retellings. That's what I thought too. Dismissible. Until an email landed in my inbox about 3 years ago. An email that had the ring of cold, hard, unwanted truth. It was from a woman named Sarah Jenkins, a retired trucker who'd driven the southwestern route since the late 70s. Her email wasn't flowery, not looking for attention. It was blunt, almost annoyed, like she was finally getting something off her chest she'd carried for too long. She stated unequivocally that she'd never believed in any of that paranormal crap, her words, not mine, until one particularly bleak night in late October, 1988, just outside the godforsaken speck on the map that is Amboy, California. Sarah described it vividly, driving through a particularly desolate stretch of the Mojave, where the landscape itself feels alien and ancient. Moonless night, the kind where the stars look like holes punched in black velvet, so bright they almost hurt to look at. Her radio, usually a crackling companion, was spitting nothing but angry static. Suddenly, her headlights, cutting a swathe through the inky black, caught a figure on the shoulder. A young woman, shockingly pale, almost luminous in the beams, wearing what looked like a thin, white dress. It billowed slightly in a breeze that Sarah, cocooned in her cab, couldn't feel. Her thumb was out, a delicate, almost pleading gesture. Sarah, a woman who'd faced down more than her share of unsavory characters at truck stops and loading docks, a woman who prided herself on her no-nonsense approach to life, felt an overwhelming, inexplicable compulsion to stop. She said it was like her hands weren't her own, like an invisible current was guiding her foot to the brake. Company policy strictly forbade unauthorized passengers. Her own common sense screamed against it. Yet, she pulled over. The passenger door creaked open, seemingly of its own accord, before she could even reach for the handle. The woman slid in without a word, a graceful, silent movement. Sarah, trying to shake off the profound unease settling over her, asked where she was headed. The woman just pointed vaguely up the road, a faint, sad smile touching her lips, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Those eyes, Sarah said, were like deep pools of sorrow. Sarah tried making small talk: the weather, the long haul, the price of diesel. The only response was that same ethereal smile, and an almost imperceptible chill that began to fill the cab, a damp cold that seeped into her bones, despite the heater blasting on high. The scent of old-fashioned lavender, faint but distinct, pricked at Sarah's nostrils. After about 10, maybe 15 minutes of this unnerving silence, the silence of a tomb, Sarah glanced over. The passenger seat was empty. She slammed on the brakes, her rig groaning in protest, heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She fumbled for her heavy-duty flashlight, jumped out, her boots crunching on the gravel shoulder. She searched, under the truck, around it, up and down the empty stretch of road. Nothing. No footprints in the thick dust, no sign anyone had been there. The passenger door was still closed, latched tight. The only thing left was that lingering, faint scent of lavender, now stronger, almost cloying, and an unnerving cold spot on the passenger seat that, she swore, took nearly an hour to dissipate, even with the desert sun starting to paint the eastern sky. She swore off night drives through Amboy for years, rerouting if necessary, adding hours to her trips. That email, that raw, unembellished account, was the catalyst. It came from a source I found credible precisely because of her ingrained skepticism. So, my producer Emily and I decided this was it. We were going to do more than just rehash old tales for the podcast. We were going to drive Route 66, the whole damn thing, from the chilly shores of Lake Michigan in Chicago to the sun-drenched pier of Santa Monica. Our mission: hunt for the truth, or at least the story, behind this spectral wanderer. Our journey began like any other ambitious road trip. Stacks of maps, an arsenal of snacks, a carefully curated playlist of classic rock and blues, the unofficial soundtrack of the Mother Road. We hit the usual spots, the kitschy giants and faded landmarks, the Gemini giant in Wilmington, still grinning his space-age welcome, the solemn beauty of the Chain of Rocks Bridge, the quirky charm of the blue whale of Catoosa. We talked to everyone: diner waitresses with beehive hairdos who'd served coffee for 40 years, leathery-skinned gas station attendants who remembered when the interstate was just a rumor, motel owners whose guest books were filled with the ghosts of travelers past. Everyone had a cousin's friend, or a guy they once knew, or a story their grandma used to tell about seeing something. The woman in white was a recurring theme, a constant, like the faded paint on old motel signs, often described as young, beautiful, but with an immense, soul-crushing sadness in her eyes. Sometimes she was seen near Oatman, Arizona, amidst the wild burros and reconstructed Old West storefronts. Other times, it was the desolate, windswept plains of New Mexico, or even further east, near the winding, tree-lined stretches in Missouri. It was like chasing smoke, a legend that shifted and changed with the teller and the territory. We even heard a particularly unsettling tale from a park ranger in the petrified forest about a lone woman's sobbing heard on the wind near the Blue Mesa, with no living soul in sight for miles. But it was always second or third hand, folklore polished by repetition. The first hint that we were onto something more than just campfire tales, something with a tangible, colder core, came in a dusty, cluttered antique shop in Seligman, Arizona, one of the towns that fought tooth and nail to keep Route 66 alive. The air inside was thick with the scent of old paper, beeswax, and forgotten things. The proprietor, a wizened old man named Elijah, with eyes as ancient and knowing as the desert tortoises, overheard us discussing our quest in hushed, excited tones. He was polishing a tarnished silver teapot, his movements slow and deliberate. Elijah. The White Lady of the Highway, eh? She's more than just a story, son, more than a whisper on the CB. She's a piece of this road, like the tar and the sand and the blood that's been spilled on it. Been around longer than most folks can remember. Some say she's a guardian, some say a warning. Me? I think she's just lost and looking for something she can never find. He didn't offer much more, just a cryptic smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. He seemed to enjoy the mystery, but as we were leaving, weighed down with a few souvenir postcards and a strange, carved wooden bird Emily had taken a fancy to, he pressed a small, tarnished silver locket into my hand. It was heart-shaped, intricately engraved with faded forget-me-nots. Found this out by the old Canyon Diablo Bridge crossing years ago after a flash flood. Always felt wrong to keep it, like it was still waiting for someone. Maybe it belongs with her story. Or maybe, he added, his voice dropping, it's the key to it. The locket was empty, the clasp broken, but it felt strangely, unnaturally cold to the touch, a deep, penetrating cold, even in the oppressive Arizona heat. Canyon Diablo Bridge. That was a new one. Most tales centered on more populated, or at least more frequently discussed haunted locales. Canyon Diablo was remote, infamous for its two guns outlaw history, its failed zoo, and the treacherous, gaping canyon it spanned. A place of violence and broken dreams. We detoured. The original Route 66 bridge near Canyon Diablo is a haunting sight. A rusted, skeletal sentinel, no longer in use for traffic, standing stark and defiant against the raw, unforgiving landscape. The wind howls through its decaying girders, playing an eerie, mournful dirge. It's the kind of place where the veil between worlds feels thin, where the past presses close. We set up our gear as dusk began to bleed across the sky, painting the canyon walls in hues of blood orange and deep violet, EMF meters, full spectrum cameras, sensitive audio recorders, thermal imagers. Emily, ever the pragmatist, was mostly humoring me, meticulously documenting everything, focused on getting good B-roll footage for the podcast. I, however, felt a prickle on my skin, an electric anticipation I couldn't shake. The locket in my pocket felt heavier than it should, pulsing with that strange cold. I kept imagining I heard faint whispers on the wind, too indistinct to be words, just impressions, sadness, fear. Hours passed. Nothing but the sigh of the wind and the distant yelps of coyotes. The temperature dropped, the desert night asserting its chilly dominance. Just as we were about to pack it in, defeated and shivering, around 2 a.m., that liminal hour when the world holds its breath, one of our parabolic microphones, aimed at the bridge, picked up something. Faint, almost inaudible, beneath the wind's moan. Emily, her face illuminated by the laptop screen, headphones clamped on, frowned, then her eyes widened. She quickly worked her audio magic, filtering, enhancing. It was singing. A woman's voice, a mournful, achingly beautiful, wordless melody that seemed to weave in and out of the wind's howl like a lullaby for a lost child. Then, a sudden, violent burst of static. All our battery-operated equipment simultaneously died, not drained, dead. Brand new, fully charged lithium-ion batteries, suddenly as useless as stones. The temperature, according to the old-fashioned mercury thermometer we'd brought as a backup, Elijah's quiet suggestion actually, plummeted by nearly 20 degrees in a matter of seconds, the mercury visibly shrinking in its glass tube. Our breath plumed in the sudden chill. And then we saw her. She wasn't on the bridge itself, but standing on the crumbling embankment leading to it, bathed in the pale, indifferent moonlight. A figure, translucent, shimmering, unmistakably female, in what looked like a long, flowing white garment that seemed to catch and reflect the starlight. She wasn't looking at us, but out towards the dark gash of the canyon, her form flickering slightly, like a bad projection or a heat haze on a summer road. She raised a delicate hand, as if pointing towards something in the abyss, or perhaps shielding her eyes from a sight only she could see. Then, slowly, agonizingly, she faded, dissolving into the cold night air like mist in the morning sun. Emily, bless her skeptical, science-loving heart, was speechless, her face as white as the apparition we'd just witnessed. Her hand was clamped over her mouth, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe. The locket in my pocket felt like it was burning a hole through my jeans, radiating an intense, icy cold. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence that descended was heavier, more profound, than any silence I'd ever known. Even the wind seemed to have died, holding its breath with us. The next morning, after a sleepless, nerve-shredding night in a generic Kingman motel, replacing all our mysteriously fried gear with a hefty dent in our production budget, We started digging, not just into general Route 66 lore, but into the specific history of Canyon Diablo and that particular bridge. Local libraries, historical societies, online newspaper archives that smelled of digital dust. We were looking for any record of a young woman, a tragedy, an accident, anything connected to that bridge around the time Route 66 was in its heyday, the 1930s or 40s. It took days of sifting through faded, brittle newsprint and poorly scanned, digitized records, dead end after dead end, stories of outlaws, mining disputes, tragic accidents involving early automobiles, but nothing that resonated with what we'd seen. Then, in the archives of the Winslow Mail, a small, unassuming article from May 17th, 1938, caught Emily's eye. The headline was stark: Local girl missing, feared lost near canyon. Her name was Eliza McCartney, 19 years old, described as fair-haired and of a gentle disposition. She had been on her way to a Saturday night dance in Flagstaff with her sweetheart, a young man named Thomas Ashton. Their car, a relatively new Ford Model A coupe, was found abandoned near the Canyon Diablo Bridge, keys in the ignition, a full tank of gas. A half-eaten picnic lunch was on the seat, no signs of struggle. Eliza and Thomas were simply gone. Further research, cross-referencing with other local papers and even church records, painted a tragic, poignant picture. Eliza was the town beauty, by all accounts. Kind, vivacious, loved by everyone. She dreamed of being a teacher. Thomas, a few years older, was described as handsome and charming, but with a possessive streak and a rumored quick, violent temper, especially when he'd been drinking. Weeks of searching the treacherous canyon and surrounding desert turned up nothing. The official theory, weak as it was, suggested they had eloped, run off to California to seek their fortune. Another, darker rumor whispered of foul play, perhaps at the hands of bandits still known to roam the more isolated areas. But there was an undercurrent in the subsequent smaller articles, a persistent whisper that Thomas Ashton had been seen a few days later, alone, looking disheveled, haunted, and agitated, hundreds of miles away in Amarillo, Texas, trying to sell a woman's wristwatch. Then he, too, vanished from the record. Eliza was never found. Her family, the articles reported, was devastated, holding on to a sliver of hope for years. Suddenly, the countless stories of the ghostly hitchhiker, the woman in white, took on a new, more tragic, and terrifyingly specific dimension. Was this Eliza, forever searching for a ride away from that desolate spot of her final moments? Or perhaps, as Elijah had hinted, trying to lead someone to what she'd lost, or what had been so brutally taken from her? The locket Elijah gave us. It felt like a burning coal in my pocket now. We managed to track down a descendant of the McCartney family, an elderly woman named Mrs. Agnes Peterson, the granddaughter of Eliza's younger sister, living in a quiet retirement community in Prescott. She was frail, with kind, watery blue eyes that held a deep inherited sadness. We showed her a photograph of the locket. Her breath hitched, her trembling hand went to her own throat, where a similar, though less ornate, chain rested. "Oh, my stars! That was Eliza's. My grandmother, Clara, she told me stories. It was a gift from their mother, for Eliza's 16th birthday. Engraved with forget-me-nots, her favorite flower. She wore it always. Always. They said Thomas probably pawned it after whatever terrible thing he did to her out there in that awful canyon." Her eyes welled up, tears tracing paths down her wrinkled cheeks. Clara never forgave him, never stopped looking for answers for Eliza. It broke her heart. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a chilling, heart-breaking mosaic. We theorized that perhaps Thomas Ashton, in a fit of jealous rage or a premeditated act of violence, had harmed Eliza near that bridge, then fled, taking the locket as a twisted trophy or for its monetary value. Her spirit, tied to her tragic, violent end, and the locket, a significant, cherished personal item, remained, a psychic scar on the landscape.
We decided, with Mrs. Peterson's quiet blessing, to return to Canyon Diablo Bridge, this time with the locket. We weren't Ghostbusters, not really. We didn't have a plan to cross her over or perform some elaborate ritual. We just felt an overwhelming compulsion to return what was hers, to acknowledge her story, her life, at the place where it was so cruelly extinguished. It was another cold, clear night, the stars blazing with an almost painful intensity. The silence was even deeper this time, as if the very desert was holding its breath. We walked out onto the edge of the old road, near where we'd seen her. I held the locket, now cleaned and polished, in my open palm. It gleamed faintly in the moonlight. Emily stood beside me, camera rolling, though this time the atmosphere felt different. Less like an investigation, more like a vigil, a solemn offering. "Eliza," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, stolen by the vastness. "Eliza McCartney? We found this. Mrs. Peterson, Clara's granddaughter, says it's yours. We wanted to bring it back to you." The air grew heavy, that familiar, unnatural chill descending like a shroud. The wind, which had been sighing through the girders of the bridge, died down to an absolute, unnerving stillness, the kind of silence that presses in on your eardrums. For a long moment, nothing. My heart pounded. I was about to suggest we simply leave it on a prominent rock when Emily gasped, a sharp, choked sound, and her hand shot out, gripping my arm, her fingers like ice. She pointed.
There, not 10 feet from us, her form was clearer this time, less translucent, more defined, yet still ethereal. The sadness in her eyes was profound, a bottomless well of sorrow that seemed to pull at our very souls. She looked at the locket in my hand, then her gaze lifted to meet mine. She didn't reach for it. Instead, she slowly raised her hand, just as she had before, and pointed, not towards the dark maw of the canyon this time, but further down the old crumbling alignment of Route 66, eastward, towards Texas. Her lips moved, and though no audible sound came out, I could almost feel the words impress themselves upon my mind, cold and clear. He didn't get away with it. He never left the road. Then, a new, terrifying element. Behind her, shimmering into view, as if coalescing from the shadows themselves, was another figure. Taller, darker, indistinct at first but undeniably male, radiating an aura of pure menace and suffocating despair. As this second figure solidified, its features still maddeningly vague, but its intent chillingly clear, Eliza's form began to flicker violently, her expression shifting from sorrow to a look of intense, visceral fear. She turned her gaze back to us, a desperate, silent plea etched on her face, her translucent hand reaching out fractionally, before both figures dissolved, not gently this time, but abruptly, like a film reel snapping or a candle flame snuffed out in a sudden gust. We were left standing there, shivering uncontrollably, though not entirely from cold. The locket felt like a brand in my palm. He didn't get away with it. He never left the road. What did that mean? Thomas Ashton? This new, chilling revelation sent us down another frantic rabbit hole. If Thomas hadn't gotten away, what happened to him? The official records, scant as they were, showed him disappearing after the sighting in Amarillo. But Eliza's spectral message, her terrified demeanor in the presence of that dark shadow, suggested something else, something far more sinister and perhaps, in a twisted way, just. We widened our search, this time looking for unsolved deaths or disappearances of unidentified men in the Texas Panhandle region, or even further along Route 66 eastward, in the months and years following Eliza's vanishing in 1938. It was a monumental needle in a haystack task, but then Emily, with her uncanny knack for digital deep dives and navigating labyrinthine online archives, found a tiny, almost forgotten mention. It was in an old Texas Rangers archived field journal, a daily log digitized by a university historical project. The entry was terse, professional, but the details sent a shiver down my spine. July 1938. Near a desolate, sun-baked stretch of what would later be bypassed Route 66 in the Texas Panhandle, some 400 miles east of Canyon Diablo. Rangers on patrol found an abandoned vehicle, broken down, tires flat, coated in dust. Not far from it, huddled beneath a withered mesquite tree, the body of an unidentified man. No ID, no wallet, nothing to mark him. Cause of death, officially listed as dehydration and exposure, common enough in that brutal landscape. But the ranger had noted peculiar, deep, claw-like scratches on his face and arms, as if he'd been fighting off something unseen, or perhaps himself, and an expression of sheer, abject terror was frozen on his desiccated features. The report also noted, almost as an afterthought, that he clutched a small, muddy, and torn lady's white dress glove in one hand. The body was buried in a pauper's grave, John Doe, number 17 for that year. No one ever claimed him. The sparse physical description of the man, tall, dark hair, approximate age, matched what little we knew of Thomas Ashton's appearance. The timing was chillingly right. Could it be? Could Eliza's tormented spirit, in its anguish and rage, have somehow pursued him? A spectral justice delivered on the lonely asphalt? Or was her lingering presence, her story, a constant reminder, a curse that drove him to his own desolate, terrified end on that same ribbon of road that had been the stage for his crime? The dark figure we saw? Was that Thomas, his own guilt and violence tethering him to her in death as he was in life, a malevolent shadow bound to the echo of his victim? We didn't have definitive courtroom admissible proof, just a chilling, compelling tapestry woven from historical fragments, personal testimony, whispered folklore, and our own inexplicable, terrifying experiences. The encounter, the entire journey, changed us. Emily, ever the scientist, still tries to find rational, mundane explanations for the equipment failure, the temperature drops, the visual phenomena. Mass hysteria, she suggests sometimes late at night, when the shadows grow long. Infrasound from the bridge structure, confirmation bias. But she can't explain the figure we both saw, twice with such clarity. She can't explain the feeling of that presence, that palpable sorrow and menace, and she never wears lavender perfume anymore. I still have the locket. It sits in a small, velvet-lined box on my desk. Sometimes late at night, when I'm working on a new story, struggling with words, I take it out. It's always cold, a deep, unnatural cold that never seems to warm to my touch. And sometimes, just sometimes, when the house is quiet and the wind is right, I think I catch the faintest, heartbreakingly sad scent of old-fashioned lavender. The Ghostly Hitchhiker of Route 66 isn't just one spirit, one story. Perhaps she's an amalgamation, a psychic residue of all the lost souls, the broken dreams, and the unfinished stories the Mother Road has collected and cradled in its dusty asphalt heart over the decades. But for me, she will always be Eliza McCartney, the girl in the white dress, her youthful dreams shattered, forever tied to that desolate bridge, her tragedy echoing in the wind, her silent plea a testament to a love that turned to unimaginable darkness. And perhaps she's not always looking for a ride away. Perhaps sometimes she's a warning, a reminder that the past is never truly dead, never fully buried, especially not on a road as storied and soaked in memory as Route 66. That some actions leave echoes so profound, they ripple through time, waiting, patiently or not, for someone to listen, to remember, to bear witness. We never did solve the mystery in any conventional sense. We didn't bring peace to Eliza or banish the shadow of Thomas. How could we? These aren't stories that often have neat, tidy endings. But we told her story. We gave her back her name, her history, at least in our minds, and to the listeners of Echoes from the Asphalt. And in doing so, we became another small, insignificant thread in the vast, complex tapestry of the legend ourselves. So, the next time you're on a lonely highway, any highway, not just the Mother Road, and the sun dips low, casting long, eerie shadows that dance like specters, and you see a figure on the side of the road, thumb outstretched in the fading light. Well, you might want to think twice. Ask yourself if it's just the play of light and shadow, a trick of a tired mind,
or if you're about to become part of a story that's been waiting decades, perhaps even centuries, for its next witness, its next participant. Because some roads, especially the old ones, remember everything. And some passengers, they never quite reach their destination. They just keep riding forever.